Now, let's head to Cape Town to speak to Jane Flanagan, the Times Africa correspondent. I spoke to her shortly before we came on air to get the latest on the protests that have been taking place in Kenya and the Congo-Rwanda peace deal brokered yesterday by President Trump. We began by speaking about what's been happening in Nairobi and right across Kenya. And I asked Jane to explain why so many Kenyans are taking to the streets to protest.
This is nationwide protests, so coordinated marches in the major cities across Kenya that was organised for this week. This is part of a movement that bubbles up and dies down again, youth-led protests against the government of President Ruto, and the marches we saw this week are the latest round of that, whereby thousands of young demonstrators, anti-government protesters take to the streets, really to show a show of force about how unhappy they are at the way in which the government is leading the country, its corruption, its poor governance record, its waste, the high cost of living, lack of opportunities for young people. These were protests across the country that were put down, as they always are in Kenya, in a really ferocious way by the security services. In fact, the Communications Authority ordered the two main broadcasters in Kenya to cut their live feed. That is in order for the security services to really crack down on the protesters under the cover of darkness, as it were, so people can't follow live on television.
And these are protests which started off peacefully with people objecting to tax rises, to inequalities, lack of services, corruption and so on, but really turned violent.
Kenya has a record of having a really merciless police force who open fire on crowds. That's not unusual. And so far, 19 people have been killed in a single day of protests. But actually, one of the reasons for the arrangement of the protest this week, it was exactly a year since another movement last year ended in the deaths of dozens of people in a single day over same issues: corruption, poor governance, high cost of living, police brutality. And this was a march this week to mark the anniversary of that. And there are still people who have never been found since last year's protest. People were disappeared, taken into custody and never to be seen again. But the Kenyan police service, the security services there, really have a really bad reputation for brutality.
And so far, they've managed to suppress the riots eventually. What does this mean for the future of the government? Is it going to be able to just ride this out, or is it actually facing some kind of concerted opposition now?
I think at this point we're seeing in East Africa especially similar a real oppression of any opposition, any criticism in neighbouring Tanzania. I think this is part of a theme we're seeing in Africa and elsewhere across the world, which is that the benchmark for impunity really is there, that leaders really can get away with an awful lot in terms of corruption, being the authoritarian rule. It seems to be on the rise, and at the moment it it doesn't look likely that President Ruto will have to do anything at all. Any protest will be put down in a very vicious way. So even if the protesters decide to regroup next week on social media and arrange another march, they'll get the same treatment. It really is. It is the pattern of events.
Meanwhile, Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo have signed a peace deal in Washington. I mean, all the focus clearly has been on President Trump's role in the Israel-Iran conflict. But it does appear as though, in this instance, he's brought these two warring African countries to reaching an agreement. Tell us what's been going on there.
This is a long-standing conflict between the neighboring Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Rwanda is accused of backing a rebel group that is active in the eastern Congo, which is very rich in mineral resources and all the critical earth minerals needed for the tech revolution, for the green revolution. And they've been, in dispute for years and years and years. But Trump has brought the two sides together to sign this agreement on easing the conflict. And in return, America will have prioritized access to mine those minerals in the Eastern DRC. I think it's been hailed as an incredible breakthrough, a very transactional peace agreement, whereby there's an awful lot of focus on what America gets out of it and how well Donald Trump has done, how beneficial it's going to be for the people in the Eastern DRC. I think there's serious questions about that.
And does it look as though this deal is actually going to hold? Because, there has been terrible loss of life in this low-level war that's been going on away from the attention of the global media for so long.
Yes, the Eastern DRC is in a perpetual humanitarian crisis. Civilians being killed, displaced, constantly on the move from rebel movements, dozens and dozens of militia groups. The main one being the M23 movement that's backed by Rwanda in terms of weapons, and also Rwandan troops on the ground. One of the criticisms of this particular deal is that it does not demand the immediate withdrawal from by the M23 rebel movement, which has taken swathes of territory in the Eastern DRC. That is not one of the demands of the peace deal. So critics of it are asking how much immediate difference or long-term difference it's going to be able to make. Yes, there's a lot of fanfare and welcoming of this breakthrough, but really the devil in the detail is, how much difference is it going to make for the civilians, for the communities living under these terrible humanitarian conditions, and what can America do to bring pressure on Rwanda to actually withdraw or bring calm to this part of the world, which has seen conflict for such an awful period of time.
Well, that was Jane Flanagan, the Times Africa correspondent, speaking to me just a little earlier.
That they don't trust the government anymore for justice.
It was terrorism disguised as dissent. There was no peaceful demonstration. It was riots, chaos, and anarchy. Let me therefore state unequivocally that we condemn the criminal anarchists who, in the name of peaceful demonstrations, unleashed a wave of violence, looting, sexual assault, and destruction upon our people.
Good afternoon. My name is Fred Kamoni from Western.
This is nothing to do with protests. This is nothing to do with freedom of expression. It was an unconstitutional attempt to change the regime of this republic. And this is therefore, yesterday what the police did to foil was they were able to foil an attempted coup.
Do you think there is a ploy to attack police officers?
And since there's no one who is going to defend our police officers, I want to speak authoritatively here. I thank you, our police officer, for a job well done against the extreme provocation